Hello, everybody. Welcome to Charting with Dan. I'm Dan Murrell. With me, as always, Lon Harris.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Lon.
Yeah.
It's the first charting of 2020. It's only been, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, I guess 3 weeks since we were here, but so much has happened.
I know. It feels like a totally different landscape.
I went a little chart crazy, I'm not going to lie. So we just need to jump right into it because we have a lot to get through today. Let's look, first of all, at the last weekend, the first weekend of 2020 at the domestic box office. As it has the last 3 weeks, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker spends a third weekend at number one after posting, and its first opening weekend, the third best opening for a Star Wars film. That's if you adjust for inflation or don't adjust for inflation.
Either way.
It also had the third biggest December opening. But Lon, let's look at Star Wars because it's obviously one of the biggest movies of the year. We were gone the whole time. Have not been here since it came out.
We haven't talked about it at all.
Haven't talked about it at all. So let's look at Star Wars, not just this past weekend and not just its opening weekend, because as I mentioned, third best in the Star Wars franchise, third biggest December opening of all time. But let's look at how it's doing since it's opened through 17 days of release. So that would be through the end of the day yesterday, through 17 days domestically. Now, we don't have daily numbers for Empire and the stuff that came out basically pre the prequels because they just weren't keeping that kind of data back then.
It was a bunch of kids tearing physical ticket stubs and windows across the nation.
So this is from 1999 to present. These are the grosses through 17 days of release domestically. As you can see, Star Wars: The Force Awakens remains by and large the winner, followed by The Last Jedi. And then there we have Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker right now, number 3 on that list. Now, it had the gap behind with it in The Last Jedi was a little bit bigger, but it made up some ground over the holidays. As we've mentioned, the holidays are weird. You lose ground, you gain ground depending on what day Christmas falls. But it is currently tracking ahead of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, well ahead of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Of course, these numbers are not adjusted for inflation. But the one thing that we're going to be looking at as we go forward is how does Rise of Skywalker hold up? What does it look like on the tail end? Because it's possible that Rogue One could end up catching it if Rise of Skywalker falls off dramatically. Now, one thing that we, like I said, didn't get a chance to talk about is the fact that The Rise of Skywalker is the only Star Wars film to not get an A CinemaScore or an A-. It got a B+ CinemaScore. That makes it, as far as those rankings go, the lowest rated live-action Star Wars film of all time. They've all been A's or A-. So does not bode well for its longevity as far as the long tail that you might see as we go into January.
Yeah, which is a lot of repeat stuff, too.
Yes.
It's like if you went to see Force Awakens 3 or 4 times, maybe you go see this one 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. So we will see. We'll keep track of how Rise of Skywalker is doing, what it does compared to the other films, what it does compared to Rogue One, where it ends up eventually. That is all yet to be seen. We're going to talk a lot more about Star Wars right now. So that was the domestic gross through 17 days. But Lon, we don't just stop there. Let's look at one of my favorite numbers, the Bits Index, and see where The Rise of Skywalker ranks along with the other Star Wars films as far as attendance goes. Butts in the seats. Again, as we know, Star Wars: The Force Awakens easily, by and large, ahead by a huge margin. Then you've got The Last Jedi. Then Episode 1, Phantom Menace, back in 1999, did a lot of business.
Yes.
That's in the number 3 spot. Remember, you don't have to adjust these numbers for inflation because this is just pure attendance. Butts in the seats.
A butt is still a butt.
A butt in 1999 is a butt in 2019. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, as you can see there at number 4, it's crossed the 50 million ticket mark sale. And remember, this is not total. This is through 17 days. And as you can see, it's holding a slim lead, as I mentioned, against Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Again, we just don't know at this point what it's going to do and how it's going to compare. If I were to guess, I would say I think that Rogue One may end up outselling.
Yeah,
Rise
well,
of
I mean,
Skywalker.
it's certainly sort of neck and neck, and Rogue One was a movie. I mean, Rogue One also a divisive kind of movie when it came out, so I think, it's going to be close.
Yeah, but Rogue One also, this was not planned, but had the extra factor of being the first Star Wars film to come out following the passing of Carrie Fisher. I think it was actually already out when Carrie Fisher passed away, so there was some engaged fan interest in that, and being the first film after The Force Awakens.
Right, and also the first of this new sort of anthology concept. I mean, we also saw, even just at the last slide, like, Phantom Menace, Force Awakens, like there's been a long lull where there hasn't been new live action Star Wars, and now all of a sudden here's this new franchise that I think you can build up interest, whereas for something like, Rise of Skywalker, it's like, well, we know what this series is. It's not new. I could catch up with it later. Yeah. It doesn't have that same kind of like, I gotta see this right now, new Star Wars.
Yeah, well, because we've had a lot of new Star Wars, too. The Mandalorian airing concurrently. It was Solo just last year, a Star Wars movie every year, which apparently we've heard we're not going to be doing necessarily anymore. So we will see what Star Wars does. One place that we know Star Wars remains not popular is China. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that Knives Out, Rian Johnson's latest film, came out in China, outperformed Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And really, this just completes a trend that we have seen, which is that the films did not have the cultural cachet in China that they did here in North America, or really most everywhere else in the world. And you can see that these are the grosses in China 2015 to present. The Force Awakens really was the introduction for a large portion of China to Star Wars. And as you can see, it made $50 million, which is, not a bad, for a foreign market, not bad. But you see a big drop off there for Rogue One. It had held about steady for Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And then you see a big drop off for Solo. And Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker may end up being the lowest grossing Star Wars movie. It's not even going to make $10 million most likely in China. So whatever interest there may have been in Star Wars in China has completely evaporated. Oddly, both sides of the Last Jedi dust-up seem to be claiming victory on that one. The people that didn't like Last Jedi have said it was so bad that China didn't go see that last one. And the people that did like The Last Jedi said that Rian Johnson got the last laugh by making a much better movie. Yeah. The point being, no one's right. And that probably doesn't have much to do with it, other than the fact that they tried to make Star Wars happen in China, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I shared that on Twitter, that Rian Johnson Knives Out factoid. And what was surprising to me, a lot of people responded like, well, we know that Star Wars is that popular in China. Granted, agreed. Yeah. But I was really surprised that Knives Out did so well in China, because my usual shorthand is things that are more culturally specific to the West, maybe not going to play as well. Things that are more universal, anybody can access, probably going to play better. And Knives Out, it's like it's playing on Poirot and Agatha Christie and sort of British manor homes. And I don't know, it just felt very Western to me.
I think you're seeing those lines dissolve.
Yeah, you really
as the world becomes more united, you're seeing fewer of those walls being built up. And
there is, detective fiction and mysteries are universal. We talked on the show before about the Detective D series in China. So, like, sure, I guess.
And you've got a number of stars, Chris Evans, that could cross over.
Daniel Craig
that could cross over. So, not surprising, but Star Wars will never happen in China.
It just seems like for whatever reason you could spend all day making up theories, but for whatever reason, it's just not connecting.
It's not happening. Which
not everything connects.
Not everything connects everywhere.
There's big Chinese movies that don't play here.
So we're talking about Rise of Skywalker and where it's going to end up. Here's what we know. We know that it's going to be the 15th film to pass $500 million domestically, eventually. It is going to become the 9th film this year to pass $1 billion globally, and we'll look at that list here in a minute. Right. We know it's going to be either the 3rd or the 4th highest grossing Star Wars film domestically, depending on where it falls with Rogue One.
Right.
It's likely to be the 3rd highest grossing Star Wars film worldwide. On the other side of that, though, it is going to be the lowest grossing film of this new Skywalker trilogy that they're closing out.
Trilogy.
When it initially came out, we talk about the fact that these trilogies a lot of times, or even a series of films, will kind of do this, where you start high because you're introducing to people, and then in the middle, people they're used to you, and then the interest in the end of it sort of ramps you back up toward the end. This one is going to be just kind of a curve, a down curve,
MCU style,
right?
Lots of hype at the beginning, some middling movies in the middle, and then
that's not the pattern. It's going to be a declining pattern. Now, keeping in mind that the top of that pattern is billions. The Force Awakens was an absolute phenomenon.
Right.
So none of the sequels would probably ever have matched that size. Sure. However, the fact that it did gross less than The Last Jedi, the CinemaScore thing with the audience as far as audience interest. It does show that you know, I think this was the big question with Rise of Skywalker is where does the audience stand on Star Wars? And I think we have two answers. One of them being through The Mandalorian, that they're not necessarily tired of Star Wars because The Mandalorian has been a massive success.
Yeah, one of the most watched shows of last year for sure.
But I think it is showing that as far as the saga films, audience interest is waning. At least from the height that it was at 2015.
I mean, I think we're at the point now where it's just Star Wars used to be a sure thing, and Star Wars is not a sure thing necessarily anymore. No. It's got to be good, grab people's interest. You can't just put anything out because it has that brand on it. It's going to be one of the biggest movies of the year. We're entering a new phase where I think you can get that level of interest.
Now, there's no way to spin this where it's not a hit. I want to be very clear about that. Even if you think it should have made this or should have made that, there's no way to spin it so that this is a financial,
sort of comparable to
success,
what we think of Star Wars movies as doing.
Exactly.
All Star Wars movies are popular. I just mean like you're not going to knock it out of the park,
right?
$1 billion every time just because the name Star Wars is on it. In order to get to that level, it's going to have to generate hype and interest all on its own as a standalone.
If you're Disney and you're sitting there looking for a verdict on Star Wars, I don't know if you got a final verdict, but I think you got a pretty definitive one in the sense of they should, you would think corporately feel free to explore these other areas as they're doing with The Mandalorian, and perhaps it is the right choice to give these movies a rest for a while because it seems like there is a saturation point.
I think Kennedy and Iger are probably making the right call to like pump the brakes a little bit, keep it out there in the world where people are still remembering it and fond of it and aware of it. But yeah, I think they've been. That to me is most of the stories. It's been too much. We've been oversaturating the theatrical market with these Star Wars movies, and people are like ready to pass on them now for a while.
Every franchise is not the same. You can't do the same with the Marvel that you can with the Star Wars, etc.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the future holds for the Star Wars films theatrically. We know that there is a big, wide open future for the Star Wars franchise on Disney Plus and elsewhere with the TV shows. And
sure, we got Mandalorian 2, Obi-Wan. Yeah,
probably. No one's going to be wanting for Star Wars material because you're going to be getting a lot of it.
No, and I mean the hardcore still have comics and novels and video games, and I mean it's Star Wars media. There's a ton, but I think the live action movies there has been maybe a little bit of a glut.
Yeah. Let's look at the rest of the top 5 for this past weekend. As I mentioned, Star Wars #1. Jumanji: The Next Level had a really strong holiday season, performed a lot like its predecessor in that it has just had a long tail. It's performed well over the Christmas holiday. It is there at #2. Little Women has come on really strong. It opened on Christmas Day and has performed well. Frozen 2 is a holdover from November, continues to rack up money. It actually was in 5th place based on original estimates yesterday, jumped up to 4th place from 5th place when the final numbers came in. And then we have The Grudge, which starts 2020 off on a rocky note because The Grudge has become, it had about a $10 million budget, so it debuted okay against its budget there with $11 million, but it became the 20th movie, just the 20th movie all time to score the coveted F on the CinemaScore. This is like an eclipse, Lon. You only get one of these like once every 2 or 3 years.
It's crazy.
I think Mother was the last one we had.
And that brings me to exactly what I was about to say, which is usually when you see the F CinemaScore, there was a big imbalance in how the movie was sort of promoted or marketed and what the movie actually is. We're sort of seeing it, I don't know what the CinemaScore is offhand, but like uncut gems. That was the sort of like a lot of people. I think it was like a C- or a C+. A lot of people thought, oh, Adam Sandler, it'll be funny. He's going to play a goofy character, and then they got this like very intense, serious movie. And I think, but that's what's so surprising with this is it doesn't seem like that's what happened here. It's The Grudge. You kind of get what you pay for and see what you get. It must just be. I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, but those who did apparently were not happy with it whatsoever.
It's not like a movie that fools you into thinking it's going to be like jump scares and then it's like brooding and very serious. Like it is apparently full of jump scares.
Apparently so, but not the kind of jump scares the audience wanted because that F CinemaScore, if it's any consolation, it did land amongst the best of the worst because when you look at the films with an F CinemaScore, adjusted for inflation, The Devil, I always looked at this, The Devil Inside, F CinemaScore, but debuted to $38 million adjusted, and I was trying to figure figure out what was going on there, but then I remembered it came out in the era of found footage, paranormal activity.
Yes,
it was a very hyped movie. It was a very cheap movie.
Yes.
By far the biggest opening.
I think you've got it. I think it was so high. I feel like I saw trailers for that for 6 months before it came out, and then it's bad.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. But it really launched with a bang back in January of that year. Lost Souls. You remember that one?
Sure.
With Winona Ryder and
oh yes, I did.
Ben Chaplin. Yeah. That's a classic. Another classic, The Wicker Man, with Nicolas Cage there at number 3, adjusted for inflation.
I mean, that movie's a lot of fun. Like, I'm not saying it's good, but I enjoy that.
The Beast thing is not in the theatrical version.
That's
cut,
right.
Though.
Yeah,
I had to find that out the hard way by
there is
watching the whole
Nicolas
movie.
Cage in a bear costume riding a bike up to an old lady and then punching her.
That is in the theatrical version. But as you can see there, The Grudge at number 4, and then I think this is a little bit what you were talking about.
Yes,
Steven Soderbergh's Solaris from 2002, and we're talking, George Clooney,
space
peak
adventure
movie star George Clooney, post-Oscar Steven Soderbergh with Traffic having been a huge hit. James Cameron on board as producer, 5 years removed from Titanic.
And it looks like it's going to be a sci-fi adventure.
People showed up and they were like, "What the hell is this?" So that's the kind of F CinemaScore that you see a lot. But congratulations, Grudge! You are one of the 5 best performing films to absolutely fail with the audiences that saw you film.
I get how you could turn in like a C- Grudge.
Yeah,
but it's like, how can you get to an F? It's like,
I don't know.
There's a scary wet girl.
Something
there. You're
something wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe people were grumpy from New Year's Eve or still hungover. I don't know. But they were not very forgiving when it came to The Grudge. Let's look at the top per theater average for the weekend. It's a movie that won big at the Golden Globes last night and is going into wide release this week. It's 1917 from Sam Mendes. It opened or stayed in 11 theaters. Its business was actually, I looked, pretty much, it stayed in the same number of theaters. It was pretty much unchanged week to week in the same number of theaters. It's hitting wide release this week. I can't recommend this movie enough, particularly in a theater. If you have the chance, if you have the means, I can't recommend enough 1917, and I think it is going to be a big contender on the Oscar stage, despite the fact that a lot of people probably don't know much about it.
Yeah.
Go see it.
It's just now starting to, I feel like, really enter the conversation, whereas a lot of these other movies have had, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood opened in August. So.
Lon, before I move on, I'd be remiss if we didn't put a bow on top of this wonderful gift that was given to us, and that would be Cats, which released the same day as Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Which is already a great business strategy. Lon, if you'll remember when I watched the musical version.
Yes, I do.
I told you that the movie couldn't be a direct adaptation of that because that would be financially irresponsible. It turned out the movie was, and it was, because Cats has grossed $24 million domestically, $57 million worldwide off a reported budget of $90 million plus, and that's before advertising and promotion. There have been reports that the movie could lose $75 to $100 million for Universal. As we know now, a laughingstock. What a movie.
Yeah, now that I've seen it and experienced it for myself, I was like 10 minutes into the movie and I was like, oh, I get why the Meowtown didn't work. We were so fixated on story and trying to make, like, what's the narrative? Like, what are they? There is none. But what we also didn't realize is how ludicrous and crazy every little thing that happens is. Like,
to be fair, the movie ramped that somehow up 100%. From the musical.
There's one point in the movie where it's Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat. We're doing his song, and it almost starts to feel like a movie, like a musical.
I felt the same way.
It's like, oh, okay, I get this. He's a cat. He thinks he's the one who's responsible for running the trains on time, and he's proud of himself. And you go visit the railway and see him dance on it. Like, this is his life. And like, oh, okay, I get what this would be. But none of the rest of the movie does anything like that.
And then he flies off into the air and disappears into a puff of smoke.
But the rest of the movie is just surreal, nightmarish nonsense.
I agree. Like, it's weird. It's like a Rick and Morty thing where, like, the Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat is the number from the musical that was made in our dimension.
Yeah.
And somebody took that scene, my pen just fell apart, and sliced it apart, and then pulled in the rest of the movie from some nightmarish Cronenberg dimension and just slapped it in, and that's the movie that we got.
Yeah, it was right around Rebel Wilson unzipping and taking off her own fur and then monster. I need to eat cockroaches that had the faces
Human
of human women.
After the mouse children.
Yeah, I was like, all right, we had no chance.
Yeah,
no chance at actually preparing people.
We were trying way too hard to make sense of something which is ultimately completely senseless.
Wow.
So,
the Mr. Mistopheles song is very catchy.
It is very catchy, but also
Everybody was singing,
kind of funereal in the film. It's much more of a jaunt in the musical.
Yes, I did. I watched it on YouTube, the musical version, and the guy who's singing it in the musical is much more like colorful and effusive.
And he does magic.
Yeah,
like,
he's much more excited to be telling you about Mr. Mistopheles.
But much like the rest of the film, all of the joy and energy was sucked right out of that number.
Except when I saw Ray Winstone's cat show up.
Except Ray Winstone and anything Ian McKellen does.
Yeah.
And
well, right, because that's another. Okay, this is the last thing, and then we'll move on.
The last thing.
The last thing, and then we'll move on. They didn't even get all on the same page about, like, how are we playing cats? Like, are we pretending that we are cats? Are we playing, like, humanoid cats? Because, like, Taylor Swift and Jason Derulo are just acting like themselves. They're not doing anything cat-like.
They're doing, like, the Fox TV version of cats.
Right. And then some of the actors are, like, they're basically just playing humans, but every once in a while they'll, like, turn their head quick or, like, do something, like, cat-like. And then Ian McKellen is, like, living it.
He's like, embodying the life of a cat.
I will become a cat.
I'm a cat.
Yeah, and he's, like, licking himself and making sounds, and like he's being a cat. How do you not? You're Tom Hooper. How do you not? First day on set. Okay, we're pretending that we are cats.
I think it's because none of them were on set together. It's fairly obvious that most of them were not on set together. Yeah,
you got to have that talk. You got to have the cat talk.
You got to have the cat talk.
Here's how you're full on cleaning yourself, scratching your ears, you're a cat, or every once in a while suggest Katniss.
They didn't have it. Katniss Everdeen. Anyway. Cats. What a disaster.
Oh my God.
Yikes.
What
All
is
right.
happening?
Let's look let's just look at the holiday season. December, really, the month of the holiday season. You have Christmas, you got Hanukkah, you have so many other holiday season gatherings. Let's look at the grosses just for December 1st through 31st. So these don't carry over from November or carry on. This is just the money made from December 1 to December 31st.
Yes.
Rise of Skywalker led all movies. It made $390 million between December 1st and the 31st. Jumanji there at number 2, $192 million. Frozen 2 made $160 million, but again, keep in mind that is a carryover from November, so it made a big chunk of its money when it opened in November. Knives Out was the 4th highest grossing film of December, $80 million, and again, that was a holdover from the previous month. As a matter of fact, Knives Out is really finding an audience. It's got right now the second best legs of any domestic release of 2019, 4.887 times and climbing. I was just looking today, it had the best hold of all the movies in the top 10 this past weekend. It's adding theaters. So Knives Out is really finding even more of a groove, has really shown a long life at the box office. And then there at number 5, as I mentioned, Little Women, which opened on Christmas Day and made enough to come in at number 5 on the list for December. So
both Knives Out, Little Women really seem to get a huge word of mouth boost. Once people started seeing them, they started telling other people, you got to see these movies.
Yeah. So Lon, next up, I've got a new chart. For 2020, I decided to introduce a new chart. You know, we always look at the top 5 domestic, and then we look at the top 5 worldwide, which includes our domestic numbers and the numbers from all around the world. But I thought it might be fun every week to also look internationally at what performed outside of the United States, but discounting the grosses here from North America. So this is the international chart, meaning these are the top 5 movies that encompasses the entire world except for North America. And I think that you get to introduce a couple new films that we wouldn't talk about otherwise. Now, Star Wars, Jumanji, and Frozen 2 led the international box office, but at number 4 is a movie called Tolo Tolo by a director named Checco Zalone, who is no stranger to breaking records. This is in Italy. It is an Italian comedy. It is just... It came out on New Year's Day and has done really, really well in Italy, a record-breaking movie in Italy. And then at number 5 is Adoring, which is a rom-com in China that came out in China. It's about people and their pets and falling in love. It's, you know...
Must love dogs.
Must love dogs.
Beijing.
In China. Yeah, exactly. So those are the top 5 for countries, all countries except for North America. And now let's look at the worldwide box office encompassing returns from everywhere. Again, Rise of Skywalker, 85 million. Then you've got Jumanji at 68 million, Frozen 2 at 54, Spies in Disguise at 26 million. That's kind of been hanging around, creeping around there. Hasn't been blowing the doors off, but it's been sneaking along there. And then Little Women at number 5. The Little Women particularly driven largely by its domestic gross. Yeah. But those are the top 5 worldwide. And then, Lon, we have controversy because Disney has been making the rounds in the press releases and whatnot, claiming that Frozen 2 is now the highest grossing animated film of all time.
Yes, I saw this.
Worldwide.
Yes.
And to the mouse, I say, to the nay, I disagree. You still have the first. This is what I don't get. They still have the highest grossing animated film of all time worldwide. Well, it's not, because by charting standards, you only have the top 4 animated grossing films of all time worldwide, because I count The Lion King as an animated film. The Golden Globes did as well. Whether Disney wants to count it as animated or not, I say it's an animated film, and I say that Disney only has now the second best highest grossing animated film of all time, and also the third and fourth, and also the first, and then you got Minions there at number 5.
Good for you, Minions.
Disney can determine their genre, I suppose, but I say
I don't think they can. I think you can determine your genre, like it's science fiction versus it's Western. But no, the whatever the tools you use to make it are the tools.
It's definitely not live action.
No, I agree.
Because it's not live action.
I agree with you. It's objectively an animated film. Whenever you're looking at the screen, you are looking at things
computer
that were animated.
Animation. Just like
you don't have any
Pixar
argument
film.
for me, yeah.
So I don't know what Disney thinks it is, but we call it animation, which means
I think it's the idea is that it's meant to trick your eye. Like it's being presented to you as if it was live action, and if you didn't know better, they would like you to assume it is live action.
But if they'd done it like a Gollum thing, where they were rotoscoping over a live actor's performance, like with the mocap suit, then I could maybe entertain it. But no, no. I say to the nay, Mouse House, nay, Lion King.
Yeah.
To this show, in this dojo, The Lion King 2019 is the highest grossing animated film worldwide, and Frozen 2 is only the second highest grossing animated film worldwide. So there.
And do be prepared. The full song. None of this prologue
None of this speak-talking thing.
What a rip.
Come on, Disney.
Still upset about it.
Jeez Louise. Okay, Lon, we're in 2020, but 2019 was a hell of a year at the movies and a hell of a year at the box office. So let's take a look back.
Oh, okay.
Let's take a look back, why don't we, at the year that was. First of all, the top 10 domestically 2019. And this is still in flux somewhat, but these are the latest numbers. Now, from here on out, we're only going to update this as needed. So if there's some movement in there, we'll tell you what it is. But these are your top 10 right now. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker there at number 3. It's going to stay there. I don't see it overtaking The Lion King. Then you've got Frozen 2 at number 4, Toy Story at number 5, Jumanji: The Next Level jumping in there at number 10. I don't see it overtaking Joker. But in case you didn't notice, Disney owns the top 6 highest grossing films domestically. It also owns 7 of the top 10. Sony with another one there with Spider-Man, Warner Brothers with Joker, and Universal, I think, with Jumanji. So Disney owning 7 of the top 10, including the top 6 films domestically. Let's look at the 2019 worldwide box office. Avengers Endgame there, number 1. Frozen 2 currently at number 3. Star Wars will soon be breaking that $1 billion mark. It's going to move up that chart. We also have Hobbs and Shaw there at number 10. Again, though, looking at the top 10, Disney has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the top 10 worldwide, including 4 of the top 5, and 5 of the top 6. So you have Aladdin and Star Wars there. Very likely that Star Wars could jump in there into the top 4 or 5. We'll see how it does worldwide. But again, Disney dominated the box office in a way that has never been seen before. As a matter of fact, I put together a pie chart for the first time ever, showing the domestic box office market share for calendar year 2019. And as you can see, Disney Fox, over 1/3 of the total business done at the domestic box office was done with Disney Fox at 36%.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers was the next biggest studio, almost 3 times less business at 13%. Then you have Sony and Universal at 11 each. Lionsgate at 6%, Paramount at 5%, and then all other studios, your A24s, your Neons, your you name it, at an 18% total. So Disney had combined twice the number of all of the smaller studios together.
I mean, it may be worth saying, like, I don't know if this isn't necessarily like this is the future. Like, this was an anomalous year for Disney.
Every single thing they put out clicked.
Yeah.
And it clicked really big.
Culminating films for both Star Wars and Marvel.
Yes.
Some of the biggest live action remakes they're ever going to get to do, like Aladdin and Lion King.
I think
it's the peak Renaissance films. So, I mean, they're obviously, I'm not saying Disney's not like a juggernaut and they're not going to run the table for a long time, but I don't think we'll see results like this.
This kind of domination was, even if Disney is the market share leader, as they have been for the last several years, I think that's very likely. But I don't think you're going to see this kind of domination year in and year out, because you're right. This was such a culmination of Star Wars ending this year, Avengers ending this year, launching Captain Marvel this year, Spider-Man doing really well this year, Aladdin really doing better than anyone had anticipated, Lion King doing incredibly well.
Frozen, having the big sequel to Frozen is this year. Like, so, I mean, obviously there's big Disney movies coming out 2020, 2021, 2022, but this was, I think, just the fates aligned to create kind of this juggernaut, unstoppable 2019.
Yeah. Let's look at the top 5 openings domestically. These are top 5 opening weekends on the domestic front for 2019. All Disney.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. I mean, Avengers Endgame, which of course completely obliterated the opening weekend record. Then you got The Lion King, followed by Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, Captain Marvel, and Frozen 2. So Disney runs the table on opening weekends domestically this year.
A lot of blue and orange.
That's pretty. A lot of blue and orange there. Orange. Looking at the top 5 opening weekends worldwide, you have almost all Disney. Avengers Endgame, again, decimating all the records when it opened earlier this year. Then Captain Marvel with the second biggest worldwide opening weekend of 2019. Disney opened it day and date in almost every market. Yeah. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker there at number 3, followed by Frozen 2, and then Spider-Man: Far From Home at number 5. From Sony nominally, but Disney obviously gets a chunk of the success of that film in the form of merchandising and whatnot. And now they have a deal with Spider-Man himself. Spider-Man himself has signed a deal with Disney to continue making movies. Congratulations
to Peter Parker.
Whoops. Well, everybody knows.
Oh, it's out.
They said it at the end of the last week.
Mysterio said it.
And Lon, we showed this at the end of the last show of the year, but let's just do it for posterity. The top 5 per theater openings for 2019 here in North America. Parasite leading the way, followed by Uncut Gems. Cyrano, My Love, which opened in Canada only, but because they're in North America, they count for this chart. Then Jay and Silent Bob Reboot and The Farewell at number 5. Those are your biggest per theater averages for 2019. And this is something I wanted to track and I thought was interesting to look at. Original films. And when I say original films, I mean not based on a book, not based on an article, not a sequel. These are original concepts, movies that were made not based on any pre-existing material. Let's look at the top 5 money earners. First, domestically, Us was the top money earner as far as, again, original films. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, some people may say it's an original screenplay. It is nominally based on real life, but it's kind of a skewed version of real life.
There was a TV show called Lancer.
Yes, there was a person as Sharon Tate.
But like, no, he's creating an original world out of all of these.
Knives Out, though, I think will perhaps eventually, and I very likely supplant Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at that number 2 spot. Good Boys there at number 4, and then Yesterday at number 5. Highest grossing original films.
Knives Out, the only one on that list likely to spawn a new franchise. We already know
Benoit Blanc will be getting his own, which I am super excited about because Daniel Craig was my favorite part of that movie. Daniel Craig was my favorite part of that movie. I see a UK. All right, let's look at the top 5 original films worldwide. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood tops that list, followed by Us, Pegasus, which was a Chinese film, then Knives Out, as we mentioned, doing well around the world, and then Abominable at number 5 did very well globally in the animation front. So that's your top 5 worldwide. And that's 2019, Lon. I don't know. Thoughts as we wrap up the year 2019?
What a year.
What a year.
Mean, yeah, like I do think I've been reading a lot of stuff where it seems like I think people are maybe taking this year to mean that it's over. Like Disney just owns everything and that's it. And they're going to just buy all the other studios and it's just Disney forever. And it's like that may happen. I'm not saying definitely not, but you want to just sort of, we got another year coming up.
Yeah.
We'll know a lot more as we go through 2020 about is this trend continuing or was this just the craziest year and it all kind of came together?
I mean, we've got Star Wars going into some sort of dormant period, even if it's only for a year or two, at least theatrically. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is at a very odd place because, we have Black Widow, which people enjoy Scarlett Johansson, but what's that draw going to be? We have the Eternals. Nobody knows what that's going to be. No huge live action remakes on the horizon that I can think
Little
of.
Mermaid?
I guess they're in production on Little Mermaid, but I'm curious. I'll be curious to see at the end of this year.
And
who breaks
Onward,
out?
Pixar's got Onward,
and Soul, but again, these are original films. These are not sequels
it's
to
not Toy
mega hit
Story
sequels.
4,
So, a year from today, I'm going to be very curious to see what Disney looks like, what that market share looks like, if anything's broken out. But
so other than Kumail Nanjiani's
but good God Almighty,
they have broken out.
That is man.
Good job.
Kudos, Kumail.
Take a year off.
I know, right? That's
work out all day.
The fitness goals. Hashtag fitness goals right there. Lon, let's look at the year that we are currently in, 2020. This is the time of year when we clear the charts, which means that who knows what could be number one. And that's why, congratulations, by default, The Grudge. You are the number one highest grossing film of 2020.
Sure to last.
Long may your reign be probably 1 week.
Last year at this time we were talking about Escape Room, which was much better liked.
It was much better liked, and it made a lot of money, and they're making a sequel, I think, that comes out this year.
But it was the movie that was in this, like, the early horror movie slot.
Yep. Yeah. There's one every year. It's Insidious, The Last Key, or Escape Room, or something like that. Usually the Bye Bye Man, the first movie I see every year is usually awful, which is why I'm glad I didn't have to go see The Grudge. 2020, let's look at the worldwide list right now. The Tolo Tolo, the Italian film that I mentioned earlier, is the highest grossing film worldwide, followed by The Grudge, and nothing else. Because we're 1 week into the new year and nothing else has come out.
Signor Zalone, enjoy.
And finally, Lon, our Meltdown is dearly departed.
Well, good. Now I wouldn't want to do it anymore.
Exactly.
That would be upsetting.
That would be very upsetting. What if I was just like, we're rolling it back, Lon? We're doing it all over again.
Buster for Jones.
Buster for Jones. No. Okay.
He eats garbage.
The Meltdown is over, but I liked counting down. I like having a goal. I like putting something out in front of us.
Yeah.
So I picked another movie that we're going to start rolling the clock on. But this one's not so much of a sure thing, which is why today on Charting, we're starting the countdown to New Mutants.
Theoretically.
We're assuming that the New Mutants is going to come out. Now, as you've noticed, I've X'd out we are plus 633 days from its original release date. We are plus 318 days from its second release date, and we are plus 157 days from its third release date. We are now allegedly 89 days away from the release of the New Mutants.
Fourth time's a charm.
There was a new trailer today.
I saw it. I watched the trailer.
It had a date on it.
It did.
It says it's coming out in 89 days. Lon, what do you think? What are the odds that this movie is actually going to hit theaters
I think
in 89 days?
I'm going to give it like 65% confident that it's going to come out when it says. Because I feel like now we've been through the Disney Fox stuff, the dust is cleared. If Disney at this point is still like, we're going to re-announce, we're going to redo all this stuff, because they know, the Disney team knows that they're going to get made fun of, and people are going to be like, this was supposed to come out 2 years ago. So if they have that level of confidence that they're willing to come back out again, new trailer, promotion, let's market this thing, I feel like they must be at least fairly confident they have something releasable.
You would think so, but I'm still not sold. So we're going to be counting down to it.
Oh, I mean, I'm like 65.
We may have to stop the clock at some point. Now, a lot of people said, oh, you should introduce us to a mutant every week. But it's like, I don't know if you want to. That might get old. We just did that. So I'm thinking what we might do is just pick a date sometime during the production process of this film. And we'll do like a this day in New Mutants history.
Oh,
like,
great.
Here's what the original opening day would have been. And what opened that week. And who was the president? Was I alive?
Yeah.
Questions like this. We're going to take you through this entire odyssey that has been New Mutants. So
I like that. I saw an article today that was saying that this is going to be Maisie Williams' first post Game of Thrones feature, and it's like that's not even accurate. She shot this well before.
Well before. That's the thing. She looks so much younger in this movie that she didn't get.
They all do. Every actor looks. It's like a time machine to 3 years ago.
It's crazy.
It's a pre-glass Anya Taylor-Joy.
We're gonna. I know, right? That's insane. Yeah. So we are going to be revisiting all of the wonderful landmarks and things that have happened on the way to this serpentine path to New Mutants. So join us as we count down to New Mutants.
Maybe.
We'll see. Maybe, maybe not. Lon, this week, if you want to hit the movie theaters, as we mentioned, 1917 expands wide. Highly recommend that. Just Mercy, which was another small release that opened right around Christmas, expands wide, starring Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, based on a true story.
Based on a true story. You can check that one out.
I liked it.
Like a Boss. If it's January, that means Tiffany Haddish has a comedy opening. And it's Like a Boss with Rose Byrne and Salma Hayek. That opens wide this weekend. And Underwater with Kristen Stewart. Underwater kind of thriller, horror thriller.
It looks right. It looks like a creature feature almost or something.
That opens this weekend. And then in limited release, a film from France that is their contribution for the Best International Film Oscar this year in place of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Les Miserables, which is not an adaptation of the Victor Hugo book, but is a movie that I enjoyed very much. So if you can find that in limited release, which it is opening limited this weekend, I also recommend that one.
There you go.
So there you go. Lon, that's all I got. It's a lot of charts.
It was a lot.
Sorry, there won't be as many next week because I can't physically produce that many.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So we're going to catch up. We're going to see how did Like a Boss do? How did Underwater do? What's going on with Star Wars, 1917, all that stuff. Lon, where can the people find you?
Go to Twitter at LONS. That's where I am. Always find me there making snarky comments.
Snarky Lon on the snarky Twitter. And you can find me at Murrell Dan on Twitter and right here on Fandom Entertainment. Next week and in between here and there, I think Ross and I are going to do our favorites of the year sometime this week. We're going to be here every day for SJU. Yeah, a lot of fun. Always having fun here. Thank you for watching. I missed you. I missed doing the charts. Thanks for joining us for another year here in 2020. We'll see you next time.